She stood at the back of the wedding hall, unnoticed by everyone. The noise around her, the soft murmurs, the clinking of glasses, the laughter filling the room didn't seem to touch her. It was as if she didn't exist at all. Maya had always been good at fading into the background. As a child, she learned to keep her head down, to blend in. But tonight wasn't supposed to be like that. Tonight was supposed to be different. Maya had been invited to the wedding, and she had spent hours preparing, picking out the perfect dress, making sure her hair was just right, trying to look her best. She wanted to be a part of this celebration, to feel like she belonged in this world. But as she entered the hall, all she felt was the weight of the stairs, the glances that quickly darted away as if she wasn't even there. She tried to shake it off. It wasn't anything new. She had felt this before, over and over again, her whole life. The feeling of being invisible, of being a ghost in spaces she had every right to occupy. But this was different. The tension in the room felt thick. It wasn't just that people were ignoring her, it was that she was being avoided. People who she had known for years, people who had smiled and laughed with her before, suddenly couldn't seem to look her in the eye. It was the subtle way they turned their backs when she walked past, the half-hearted waves that were more out of obligation than genuine warmth. Maya knew what it was. It wasn't her personality. It wasn't anything she had done. No, it was something else entirely. It was the color of her skin. Maya took a deep breath and moved to the side, finding a seat at the edge of the room. She didn't mind sitting alone. She had always been more comfortable on the sidelines, watching the world around her instead of fully participating in it. But tonight she couldn't help but feel the sting of exclusion. It wasn't that she wanted to be the center of attention, but she wanted to feel like she was part of something. She wanted to feel seen. She glanced over at the bride, Emily. Emily had been her friend for years, ever since they were children. They had grown up together, shared secrets, laughed together, cried together. Maya had always been there for her, supporting her through thick and thin. And Emily had always been the one person who truly saw her. But tonight, even Emily didn't seem to see her. The bride, dressed in a beautiful white gown, was surrounded by a crowd of people, smiling, laughing, basking in the glow of her big day. But when she looked over at Maya, it was the same thing as everyone else. A glance, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and then quickly looking away. Maya turned her gaze back to the floor, her heart sinking. This wasn't the way it was supposed to be. She was supposed to be happy for her friend, supposed to be celebrating with her. But instead, she felt like an outsider, like she didn't belong. The feeling was so familiar, so painful. It was the same feeling she had carried with her throughout her entire life, but tonight it was sharper. It was the feeling of being unwanted, unimportant. It was the feeling of being judged not for who you were, but for what you looked like. The night dragged on, but it felt like it had come to a standstill. The music played, the guests danced, and the celebration continued around Maya, but it felt like a blur. She tried to force herself to enjoy the evening, to be happy for Emily, but it was hard when she felt so invisible, when she felt like no one truly cared about her presence. The whispers started, the quiet murmurs between people as they glanced in her direction. Maya didn't need to hear their words to know what they were saying. She knew, she had heard it all before. What's she doing here? She doesn't belong. It wasn't a conscious thing, she knew that. People weren't walking up to her and saying these things directly, but their actions spoke louder than words. The way they moved around her, the way they pretended she wasn't there, the way they looked at her but didn't really see her, it was all a message. A message that she wasn't welcome, that she wasn't part of their world, and it hurt. It hurt more than she could explain. The groom, David, stood up to give his speech, and Maya tried to focus on him. He was her oldest friend, the one person who had never made her feel invisible. He had always seen her for who she truly was, not the color of her skin. She had always admired him for that, for his ability to look beyond the surface and understand the complexities of the people around him. But as he began his speech, Maya felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere. There was an unease in the air, a tension that she couldn't ignore. David was speaking, but his words felt distant. They felt rehearsed, as if he were reading from a script rather than speaking from the heart. Maya couldn't put her finger on it, but something about his voice, about his demeanor, didn't feel right. She tried to shake off the feeling, but it was there, gnawing at her. David continued, thanking everyone for being there, for supporting him and Emily on their big day. He spoke about love, about friendship, about the future. But when he mentioned Maya, there was a hesitation. His words faltered for just a second, but it was enough to catch Maya off guard. "I want to thank Maya for being here," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "She's been a part of my life for a long time, and I truly appreciate everything she's done for me. She's been there for me through thick and thin." The room grew still and Maya's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't what he said that stunned her. It was the way he said it. There was a weight to the words, a heaviness that didn't belong in a celebration like this. The guests around her shifted in their seats, and Maya could feel their eyes on her. Some looked curious, others uncomfortable. It was as if David's words had somehow exposed something that no one wanted to confront. The awkward silence stretched on, and Maya couldn't breathe. She felt like a spotlight had been turned on her, and the entire room was waiting for her to respond. But what was there to say? What could she say? David cleared his throat and smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Maya forced herself to smile back, but it felt hollow. She felt trapped in this moment, trapped in this room full of people who couldn't seem to accept her for who she was. And that's when it happened, the moment that would change everything. David's voice, once shaky, grew more forceful. "But there's something more," he said, his eyes now locked onto Maya's. "Something that's been bothering me for a long time. And I think it's time we address it. You see, Maya, you've always been there for me, but I don't think you've ever really been accepted by the people here, by the people who should have been your friends, by the people who should have stood by you." Maya's heart stopped. What was he saying? Was this a joke? Was this some kind of twisted prank? But there was no humor in his voice, no joke. He continued, his words coming faster now, his tone more urgent. "Maya, you've been ignored, pushed aside, and treated like you don't belong. But I know you. I know you deserve better than this. You deserve better than the way they've treated you, the way they've treated us. You deserve to be seen. And I can't stand by and watch this happen anymore." The room fell into complete silence. Maya's head was spinning. What was happening? Was David really saying these things in front of everyone? In front of the guests, in front of Emily? Her hands were shaking now, her stomach twisting in knots. The walls felt like they were closing in on her. She wanted to run, to escape this moment, but she couldn't. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. And then in the silence, the room seemed to exhale. The whispers started again, but this time they were louder, more urgent. People turned away, embarrassed, unsure of how to react. But the damage had been done. The truth had been exposed. The truth that Maya had always known, the truth that had been hiding in plain sight, was now out in the open. She had never truly belonged. Maya felt as if the ground beneath her feet had shifted, as if the very fabric of the world she knew had unraveled in that one moment. The whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire. She could hear the phrases that were being exchanged in hushed tones. "Is that really true? Why didn't we notice before? How could we let this happen?" But none of them asked Maya. No one came to her side. No one seemed to care how she was feeling, or whether she needed support in this moment of intense exposure. Maya wanted to scream. She wanted to yell at all of them, to say that she had been carrying this pain for years, quietly, silently, trying to fit into a world that would never let her belong. She wanted to shout out every hurt, every injustice that had been done to her, but the words never came. Instead, she stood there, paralyzed by the very thing she had feared her entire life, the rejection. The world had always told her that she didn't belong, and now, in front of everyone she had ever known, they were confirming it. David, still standing there, continued to speak, but his words felt hollow to Maya now. He was trying, she knew that. He was trying to make things right, but the damage had already been done. This moment, this painful truth, had shattered everything she had believed about friendship, about loyalty, about the world she thought she had been a part of. She had thought David was her ally, that he saw her for who she truly was, that he appreciated her for the person she had been for him. But now here he was, exposing everything she had worked so hard to hide. He was trying to protect her, to stand up for her, but all it did was drag her deeper into the spotlight. It wasn't about being seen anymore, it was about being judged. Everyone in the room was looking at her, judging her, questioning her presence, her worth, her place. Maya's eyes flitted around the room. She tried to make eye contact with anyone who might offer support, but there was no one. The faces around her were a blur, some confused, some guilty, some indifferent. But none of them were the faces she had wanted to see in this moment. None of them were offering a lifeline, a hand to pull her out of the suffocating atmosphere that seemed to surround her. And then, as if to add insult to injury, Emily stepped forward. Maya's heart sank as the bride approached. Emily had always been the one person she thought would understand her, the one person who would never let her feel this way. They had shared so much, laughs, tears, memories. Emily had known her struggles, her fights, and she had always been there by her side. But now, standing in front of Maya, Emily's face was a mask of uncertainty. The room seemed to hold its breath. Emily hesitated, clearly struggling with her own emotions. Maya could see it in her eyes, the confusion, the guilt, the hesitation. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She closed it again, taking a deep breath, as if steeling herself for something. "I don't know what to say," Emily said, her voice shaky. "Maya, this isn't easy. I didn't know. I didn't realize what you've been going through. I didn't see it." Maya felt a sharp pang in her chest. She had always assumed Emily saw her. She had always thought that, no matter what, Emily understood. They had shared their lives, their dreams, their struggles, and yet Emily hadn't seen her. She hadn't seen the pain that Maya had been hiding, the hurt that she had buried deep inside. Maya had always tried to make herself invisible to avoid the judgment, to avoid the pain of rejection. She had kept her head down and smiled through it all, thinking that if she played by their rules, if she conformed to their expectations, they would accept her. But here, in front of everyone, Emily was admitting that she hadn't even looked. "You didn't see me," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible, but the words felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. She didn't know where the words came from, but once they were out, there was no taking them back. Emily's face fell, her eyes filled with regret. She opened her mouth to speak again, but Maya couldn't bear to hear it. She couldn't hear another empty apology, another sorry that meant nothing when the pain had already been done. Maya turned, walking out of the room without a word. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She didn't need to see their faces anymore, their guilt, their shock, their shame. She didn't need to hear their apologies. She didn't need their pity. The night air hit her as she stepped outside, but it didn't feel like freedom. It felt cold, almost suffocating. The streets were empty, the silence surrounding her unbearable. She didn't know where she was going, but she kept walking, her mind racing. The world felt like it had crumbled beneath her feet, and she didn't know how to pick up the pieces. Maya didn't cry, not yet. The tears were there, lurking beneath the surface, but she wouldn't let them fall. Not now. Not when she had just been exposed in front of the world, when her pain had been laid bare for everyone to see. She didn't know what to do with it. She didn't know where to put it. Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out of her pocket, seeing a message from David. She had no idea how long it had been since he sent it, but she hadn't checked her phone until now. Her thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before she tapped it open. The message was simple, but it hit her harder than she expected. "I know you're hurting. I'm sorry for what happened. I never meant for any of this to go the way it did. I was trying to help. Please let me know when you're ready to talk. I'm here for you." Maya stared at the words, her heart heavy. She didn't know what to feel. A part of her wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much he had hurt her, how much his actions had torn her apart. Another part of her wanted to thank him, wanted to acknowledge that at least he had tried to stand up for her, that at least he had exposed the truth. But the truth was a double-edged sword. And in this moment, Maya didn't know which side she was on. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard as she considered her response. The words wouldn't come. She wasn't ready to talk. She wasn't ready to face him, to face any of them. Not yet. She put the phone back in her pocket, staring out at the river once more. The silence was all-consuming. The water below was still, unchanging, unaffected by the storm that raged inside her. For a long time, Maya simply stood there, letting the cool breeze wash over her, feeling the weight of everything she had been carrying slowly begin to sink in. She was angry. She was hurt. But more than that, she was exhausted. She had spent so much of her life trying to prove her worth, trying to fight for a place at the table. But now, she was done. Maya wasn't going to fight anymore, at least not like this, not for the people who refused to see her. She wasn't going to keep pouring herself into spaces that were never meant for her. If they didn't see her, if they didn't want her, then she wasn't going to beg for their acceptance. She turned away from the railing and began walking again, her steps slower now, more deliberate. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know where this journey would take her, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let this define her. She would not let their rejection, their ignorance, their prejudice break her. The road ahead would be long, it would be hard, but Maya had survived far worse than this, and she would survive this too, because in the end the world didn't get to decide who she was. She did. The days that followed were a blur, but as each one passed, Maya's resolve began to harden. She didn't talk to David or Emily. She didn't reach out to anyone. The messages and calls from her friends went unanswered. At first, it felt like a weight had been lifted, but soon, a different kind of weight took its place. A weight that came with the realization that the world around her had been broken long before that night at the wedding. It wasn't just her world that had fallen apart. It was the world she had tried to fit into, the world she had tried to believe in. She went back to work, back to her daily routine, but something was different. She wasn't the same person who had entered that wedding hall weeks ago, desperate to be seen, desperate to belong. Maya had always been strong, but she had been carrying the wrong things for far too long, other people's expectations, their perceptions, their judgments. She had been carrying a burden that didn't belong to her, and now she was putting it down. It wasn't easy, it wasn't quick. There were moments when doubt crept in, moments when the loneliness felt suffocating. But each day, Maya found a little more peace in herself, a little more strength in the silence. She started reading more, not just the books she had always enjoyed, but stories of others who had been in her shoes. Stories of people who had fought for their place in a world that wasn't built for them. She read about the struggles of Black women who had fought against the same systems of injustice she had encountered. She read about their resilience, their courage, and their unwavering commitment to fighting for themselves when the world refused to do it for them. And that was when it hit her. She didn't need their approval. She didn't need their acceptance. She didn't need their recognition. What she needed was her own. Maya had been giving so much of herself to others for so long, seeking validation from those who could never give it to her, seeking a place in a world that didn't know how to make space for her. But that wasn't her battle to fight anymore. Maya wasn't going to waste another second trying to prove her worth to people who didn't see her. The fight wasn't about earning their approval. It was about recognizing her own value. And she had value. She had always had value, even when they tried to make her feel invisible, even when they tried to erase her. Weeks later, Maya found herself back at the same wedding hall where everything had unfolded. It wasn't by choice, but by necessity. A small event, a community gathering this time, was being held there, and Maya knew she had to attend. She hadn't seen Emily or David since that night, but part of her felt like she needed to face the space where everything had come crashing down. Not for them, but for herself. The hall was different now. It wasn't filled with the same energy, the same people. Maya walked in, her head held high, her back straight, her eyes scanning the room. She wasn't the same person who had walked out in tears that night. She wasn't the girl who had let everyone's rejection define her. No, Maya was someone new now, someone who had learned that her worth didn't lie in the approval of others. She walked up to the table where the event organizers were seated, a smile on her face. They greeted her with warmth, and for the first time in a long time, Maya felt no need to apologize for taking up space. No need to shrink back. She wasn't invisible anymore, and no matter how they saw her, no matter what they thought, that was something they would have to come to terms with. It didn't take long for Emily to walk in, her eyes scanning the room. When their gazes met, there was a flicker of something in Emily's eyes, recognition, regret, maybe even guilt. But Maya didn't look away. She didn't flinch. She held her ground, waiting to see what would happen next. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the air between them, a heavy silence stretching out. But then, Emily stepped toward her. I'm so sorry," Emily said softly, her voice filled with sincerity. "I never understood. I was blind and I don't know what to say." Maya looked at her, and for a long time she didn't say anything. There was nothing that Emily could say to undo the hurt, to undo the years of being overlooked, dismissed, ignored. But what Emily was offering, what she was giving, wasn't an apology, it was understanding. And that, Maya realized, was the most important thing. "I don't need an apology, Emily," Maya finally said, her voice calm but firm. "What I need is for you to see me, to see the people like me. We're not invisible. We're not some side note in your story. We are here. We have always been here." There was a pause and Emily nodded. She didn't try to speak over Maya's words, didn't try to defend herself. She simply listened. And for the first time, Maya felt like she was truly being seen. Not as an afterthought, not as someone to be pitied, but as someone who had a voice, someone who mattered. Maya turned and walked away from the conversation, but this time she didn't feel like an outsider. This time she didn't feel like she was invisible. She felt strong. She felt whole. Over the next few months, Maya began to make changes in her life. She started speaking out more, sharing her experiences, her story. She connected with others who had experienced the same rejection, the same hurt. She began to build a community, not of people who would only accept her when it was convenient for them, but of people who understood her, who saw her for who she truly was. She began to speak about the systemic racism she had faced, the ways it had shaped her life, the ways it had shaped the lives of so many others. And when she did, she didn't wait for people to validate her. She didn't wait for anyone to tell her she was right. She knew the truth, she knew the pain, she knew the fight, and that was enough. Maya's story wasn't just her own. It was the story of countless others, countless women of color who had been made to feel like they didn't belong, countless voices that had been silenced, countless people who had been ignored for far too long. And as Maya continued to find her voice, to use it for change, she realized that the world wasn't going to change overnight. But with each small victory, with each person she reached, she was making a difference. And so Maya kept going, because no matter how many times the world tried to make her invisible, she would always fight to be seen. And in doing so, she would help others find the strength to do the same. Weeks went by, and with each passing day, Maya grew stronger. She was no longer the woman who had walked into that wedding hall, unsure of her place in the world. She was a woman who had found her voice, her purpose, her identity. Her life had been rewritten, not by the world around her, but by her own hand. She was creating a new narrative, one where she was not just a survivor, but a fighter for justice. She had the power to change not only her story, but the stories of others who had been silenced for far too long. As she continued her journey, Maya realized something profound. She had been invisible for so long, but now she was undeniably seen. Her strength, her resilience, her passion for justice, those things could no longer be ignored. Maya stood at the front of every march, spoke at every rally, and led the charge for racial justice. And as she did, her message rang clear for everyone to hear. We are here. We have always been here. She had become a symbol for those who had been ignored, for those who had been overlooked. She had found her purpose, and with it, she would not be silenced. At sunset, Maya stood alone on a rooftop, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The city below her bustled, but she was calm, centered, ready to face whatever the world had in store. The golden light reflected her new beginning, one that was hers and hers alone. Maya had learned that she didn't need to change the world overnight. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. All she had to do was stay true to herself, and in doing so, she would inspire others to do the same. Her future, now more than ever, was filled with hope. And it wasn't just her future. She was paving the way for others to find their own voices, to find their own strength. Maya no longer wondered if she belonged. She knew that she did. And that knowledge, that certainty, would carry her through every challenge that came her way. With every step, Maya walked forward with confidence, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt unseen, unheard, or forgotten. Because no matter what the world said, she knew the truth, she mattered, and so did they.